Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Welcome to Want to Hear Something Weird. I'm Laura.
I'm Tom.
And when we come across strange stories, we love sharing them with one another. So now we're inviting you, the listener, to indulge in the curiosity for bizarre and unexplained things along with us. So Tom, want to hear something weird?
I'd love to hear something weird.
I am going to tell you the story today about Don Decker.
Okay. Already sounds like a fake man.
He
works in an ad agency on Madison Avenue in the 60s.
He had the power to make it rain.
Like, he was rich?
Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that he was.
Okay.
He seemed like a regular man.
So, and where'd he get all the money he used to make it rain? What?
I don't know how to answer that.
Are you telling me he didn't use money to make it rain?
There's absolutely no money involved.
So it was actual rain.
Yes.
He could make it rain.
He could make it rain.
Okay.
So I'm getting the sense from you that you're feeling like this is pretty unbelievable.
Well.
And fair enough.
Uh-huh.
But this case has 9 very credible witnesses who actually saw this happen.
Okay.
And I found this story because it's a pretty notorious Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. From like the original run of Unsolved Mysteries, presumably.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
Not to disparage, the new episodes I think are great too.
We're big fans of Unsolved Mysteries over here. So the story takes place in February of 1983 in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, a place that you and I have been.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that place.
And
don't tell me this is why Robert Stack always had that raincoat on.
But yes,
because
it could rain at any point.
Because they were trying to solve this mystery and he thought maybe this guy's going to make it rain on them.
Uh-huh. And the story centers around a young man who is 21 years old named Don.
Okay. What year was this again? Sorry.
1983.
Okay.
Now, Don was in prison for 4 to 12 months for receiving stolen property. So he's got a short prison sentence, but he's out on furlough in order to attend his grandfather's funeral.
Okay.
And the story comes out that after his grandfather passed away, that Don comes forward and says that his grandfather had abused him since he was a child.
Okay.
So this is a very emotionally heightened time, and no one else in the family knew about this.
Yeah.
So following the funeral, it sounds as though he's got like a little bit of time before he needs to return to prison, just kind of like, you know.
He asked for the day and they told him, take the week.
That's how it works. So he stays with some friends named Bob and Jeannie Kiefer.
Okay.
Bob and Jeannie live in a house in, like I said, Stroudsburg, and the first night that Don comes to visit to stay with them is the night of the funeral, following the funeral. And Don was upstairs in their upstairs bathroom getting ready for dinner, and he suddenly felt confused and strange and felt as though like all the air had been like sucked out of the room.
Okay.
And he fell down and had a vision of an old man who was laughing and wearing a crown in the bathroom window. And then he had deep scratches that appeared all of a sudden on his wrist.
Okay. So some kind of scratching ghost king.
Yes. Later, after, Don and his friends had dinner, Don starts to feel like a very deep chill. And almost at the same time, water began to drip from the ceiling. And he fell into sort of like a trance.
Okay.
So
probably around this time, his friends are regretting letting their friend from prison stay the night with them.
So Bob and Jeannie, are kind of like, this must be pipes. This must be like maybe something's running upstairs. So they're kind of running around trying to figure out where it's coming from.
There's a leak.
Wondering
somewhere.
if they're like they must have a leak, but they cannot find the source of the leak.
Mm-hmm.
So they call.
It's not raining outside, presumably.
It's not raining outside. Mm-hmm. So because they're unable to find the source of the water, they give their landlord a call, and his name is Ron.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes over, and he comes in and sees the rain and thinks that, again, like, okay, there's got to be like crazy piping, but he's running around thinking, well, there are no pipes in the front part of the house, which is where this is happening. It's really contained in the living room of the house.
I never really think about that, but I guess, pipes don't like run all throughout a house.
Yeah.
I remember the time I realized that in most places, like bathrooms are all in the same place on different floors because of the piping.
Oh, yeah.
They're usually just kind of right above one another.
If
you ever need to find the bathroom on a different floor, check where it is on the first floor first. So no pipes in the front of the house. Yes. Makes sense.
And at this point, the friend, Bob, and the landlord are running around. Jeannie, the other friend, is finding pots and pans to kind of like collect water.
Yeah.
Don is still sitting there in a trance. And the landlord said he appears on Unsolved Mysteries. A lot of these people do appear in interviews. He said that he realized it wasn't only coming down from the ceiling, that it was actually coming from all over. So it was coming from like the floor up. It was coming from the walls aside. Like it was just the physics.
Everything was getting real damp.
Yeah. Well, it was coming from all over, all these different directions, not like just top down.
Okay.
And he couldn't find any leaks. So he calls his wife, and then he calls the police. They all come over. There's two patrolmen that also, again, appear on Unsolved Mysteries. And the first one walks in. He's like, I'm speechless. I have no idea what's going on. So he calls his partner in, and he said to his partner, I want you to walk in the house. And this partner says, well, you have to explain to me what I'm walking into here. And he's like, just trust me, walk in. And he came in, and he was pelted with water. He said he was just absolutely pelted with water. So again, he's describing how these drops are defying physics. They're coming in all different directions, not just from like the ceiling down.
Like a fire hose, it sounds like at this point, or a sprinkler or something. Yeah.
Or a demon. But it was freaking them out at this point. Yeah. Like, this is weird. It was a lot of it. It wasn't just coming from one contained spot. I mean, it was the entire room was just getting drenched. And they said, they realized it's contained in the living room, which was also where Dawn was at this point.
Still in the trance.
Yes.
Okay.
Still in the trance. So all of this is happening. This is, at this point, hours have gone by. They're trying to figure things out, and they just can't. There's just this rain is just nonstop. And they're spooked. They're all pretty spooked. They live across the street from a restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant came over and also witnessed the rain. And kind of says to Bob and Jeannie, the couple that live in the house, you guys should come over to the restaurant, like take a break from being in the rain.
Yeah. Hey, dinner on me.
And it looks like it was a pizza joint.
Okay.
And so the police end up leaving to go back to report this to their chief of police, and everybody else goes to this restaurant.
Who's probably going to ask for their badge and guns.
So Don, Jeannie, and Bob head over to the restaurant. The landlord and his wife stay behind, and they said as soon as Don left, the rain stopped.
Oh, so Don went to the restaurant.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So and guess what happens at the restaurant?
It starts raining.
You got it.
Oh, that guy's going to regret inviting them over.
It was a woman.
It was a woman that owned a pizza place. Wow.
And she thinks she's spooked and is like, he's got to be possessed.
Yeah.
And she goes over to her cash register, which has she has a cross or a crucifix
in the cash register,
or next to it or something, and puts it on Don. And it burns his skin.
Never a good sign.
And this kind of convinced her that he was possessed, and she told Bob and Jeannie, you have to call the church and have have the church have someone look at it, visit with him. Or she said that there's no way anybody could have, played a joke like that, that it was, that she was certain it was real. And she thought that Don was causing it without even realizing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing at this point, like, he's still kind of in a trance, like still kind of not super responsive.
Not completely himself.
Yeah. They were able to like get him across the street, but he's still out of it.
Right. We just wanted to take a second to thank you for listening. Want to Hear Something Weird is a new podcast, and we're trying to get the word out about the show and reach listeners who like good stories about weird stuff. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love if you could subscribe and take a moment to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. 5-star ratings really help to surface our show to new listeners. And if you really want to help the podcast, writing up a little review with that rating goes a very long way. That would be amazing. Thank you.
We're also super excited to hear from our listeners. You can tweet at us at WannaHearPod or follow us on Instagram at WannaHearPod. But really, we'd love any feedback, comments, or suggestions you want to email our way. We're at wannahearpod@gmail.com. If you want to email an audio note, we just might play your voice on an upcoming episode.
So later, Don is also in this episode of Unsolved Mysteries telling the story.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very interesting episode. And he said that he believed he was responsible at this point. He was like, well, this is happening everywhere that I am. And it's been like a full 24 hours at this point. Mm-hmm. And he thought like the fact that it happened in the restaurant too, it was like, okay, this wasn't just contained at the house. It's something weird happening there. Well, it's following me.
And did he kind of have any recollection of like what he was feeling when that was going on? Why he was like out of it?
He felt he felt just chilled, and that all the air had been sucked out of the room is how he described it. Like he just felt strange.
Yeah.
And
it's nice that he like owns up to it. He's like, look, some weird stuff happened last night, and I gotta be honest, the whole time it was happening, I felt extremely weird. So I think that, combined with the fact that it followed me from one location to the other, you know what, guys, I'll own up to it. I think it might be me.
So they leave the restaurant, head back to the house, and the landlord and his wife are there.
Do you know if they got anything to go?
I don't.
Because I kind of imagine Don probably like wasn't really eating while he was
possessed.
While he was possessed, and also it was raining, so you never want to
soggy pizza.
Yeah, you don't want to eat soggy pizza.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, like oily pizza, that's bad, but watery pizza, even worse.
Even worse. It's the last thing you want. So they head back over, and the landlord and his wife are there, and they're kind of like, we need to confront Don. He's causing this. Like, this is a weird prank, and it needs to stop.
Right.
And at that point, pots and pans on the stove start to rattle, and Don is levitated off of the floor as if he was like floating.
Okay, so they were probably like, we'll talk about it tomorrow with them.
I'm gonna head home.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's fine for tonight.
But Don describes it as like he felt like it was a push, but it wasn't like someone taking a hand pushing him. It was almost like being pushed all over his body at once.
Okay, so just like pressure everywhere, and that like, rose him into the air.
And he said, quote, "I'm a big guy, I've always been assertive, and that made me feel like a newborn."
Yeah.
So this kind of convinced everyone in this group, like, okay, this is demonic. And
yeah. This isn't some prank Don's been spending the last 4 months in jail coming up with.
So the police return, this time with the police chief. And the chief got to the house. He came in and was, hit with all this water. Just like everyone else had been.
I'm just imagining him opening up, like all right, you idiots, I'll get to the bottom of this, opening up the door and it just being a comical flood of water, like blowing him off the porch.
I kind of picture it more like a car wash, but maybe in like a little less intense pressure. Like in the show, they obviously recreated in Unsolved Mysteries. It kind of just looks like outside rain come inside. But I'm thinking because it's kind of happening from all these different angles that it is a little bit more like a car wash, like coming in the walls and the floor and everything.
Well, you know this, but I interned for America's Most Wanted. And I remember one recreation we did at the time. It was supposed to be Tennessee in the summer, but there was a foot of snow on the ground. So they just had the guy take his shirt off while he was riding a motorcycle to imply that it was summertime, even though there was water. So I don't necessarily or snow. I don't necessarily trust like 90s era Unsolved Mysteries or 80s to faithfully recreate what happened that night.
The thing, Unsolved Mysteries often will try to shoot on location of where the incident happened, and often, for better or for worse, include people that were involved.
Yeah, that's right. Because a lot of times in the reenactments, people are very bad, and then you see them in the interview, and you go, "Oh, okay, I get." You're like, why'd they hire such a bad actor? I get it's just a recreation.
Yeah. So the chief,
after he went in, he got pelted by the water.
And he completely dismisses the incident, said it's nothing, not a police issue, and tells the other officers, like, don't even file a report, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
This is like a plumbing issue. So he completely dismisses it. The other police officers who was interviewed in the episode says, like, he thinks the police chief felt like he was put on the spot, that everyone was expecting him to be able to come in and have an answer, and he obviously didn't. So he's really like the one that notoriously has not come forward,
talked about his experience.
Yeah.
I mean, that I get it. He's got nothing. He came in, he saw it, and he's like, "This isn't a crime."
Yeah.
I don't know what you want us to do.
Right.
It's a plumbing issue or something supernatural. In either case, not under the police's purview.
Right. So the following day, 3 officers completely ignore the chief's orders and come back to investigate. Because they're like invested now. They're curious.
They saw some really weird stuff.
They've never come across anything like this.
Where did this happen again? Oh, Strasbourg, right? Okay.
So one of the police officers gives Don a cross, again, another crucifix to hold. And he said, Don says, "It's burning my hands." And the officer takes it back and says it was hot.
Wow. Okay.
All of a sudden, Don's lifted up off the ground and flies across the room with a force as though a bus had hit him.
Okay.
And there are claw marks on the side of his neck. So it seems like when there's like very heightened things, like something like bringing a crucifix out or questioning him, it's like he gets violent. It becomes violent.
Yeah.
So they finally, the landlords and the friends of Don decide it's time to try to find someone to perform an exorcism. They find, I think she's a pastor or a preacher.
Okay. So not like a Catholic
Not
priest.
a Catholic priest. I guess they had tried to, and like they were turned down.
Yeah, they've got all kinds of like procedures that have to happen before they'll do an exorcism.
Right.
A lot of bureaucracy.
And at this point, this is several days of this kind of continually happening. So.
And Don's probably like, I gotta get this figured out before I go back to jail.
Right. Well,
because the other prisoners are not.
Wait. So the preacher comes, prays over Don in the living room. Don begins like convulsing wildly. There's like this very strong putrid smell in the room. More rain begins to come down. And then after a while, Don does calm down and it feels like a peaceful feeling came over the house. The rain stopped and the smell went away. And that was the last time the rain ever happened inside that house. The rain never came back.
Okay.
And Don seemed at this point to like kind of return to his old self.
A happy ending. All's well that ends well.
But not for long. So Don obviously his furlough ends and needs to return to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And within a few days, the mysterious rain has returned. So he had to stay in a cell with another inmate. And the rain began to come out of the floor, the concrete floor of the cell.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And his cellmate is obviously quite freaked out, panics, and calls the guard to come and ask to be moved.
Yeah, understandable.
And Don, at that point, realizes he kind of like can control this. He starts to feel powerful.
Okay.
And his demeanor freaked other inmates out. A lot of them like didn't really want to have anything to do with him. So some of the guards witnessed the rain and like describe it as being able to defy gravity because it could like travel up the walls and go sideways through the air, like kind of exactly what was happening at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And one guard in particular was skeptical and was questioning about it. Was like, "You're making this up. Like, how are you doing this?"
That's a good way to get soaked. Asking those kinds of questions.
Well, Don says he has the power to control it. Like, I can make it happen. And the guard's like, well, then prove it by making it rain in the warden's office.
Oh, boy.
At the same time, the warden is sitting at his desk in his office writing a report. And he didn't feel anything unusual at first, but then he noticed his shirt started to like droop a little bit. This is about at 8 p.m. And he realizes that there's a wet spot on his shirt that's like pretty large. That really there's really no other explanation for how it got there kind of quite suddenly. So the guard came to talk to the warden about Don and saw this wet spot there.
Hey, warden, how'd you get that wet spot?
Yeah. And the warden and the guard looked down the hall towards Don's cell, observed a small ball of water that was heading towards them, and the water struck the warden in the chest and then splashed off. And the warden is like freaked out.
Yeah.
He's spooked, and, coupled with what this guard is telling him about Don's apparent abilities. And the guard himself is just like beyond scared.
Yeah, he went from skeptical to
get me out
looking for a new job.
Yeah. And they were completely unable to explain what happened. But the warden's trying to approach this in sort of a logical manner and calls a plumber to look at the,
Finally, somebody calls a plumber.
But the plumber goes in the cell. He kind of becomes quickly upset.
I'm
agitated.
Imagining this demon getting upset about a plumber the same way he would about Jesus and a cross.
Yeah.
Just being like, now.
Yeah, you're ruining my good time.
Yeah. So the plumber goes in, he gets upset.
He kind of gets upset and just like turns around and leaves. And he's like, don't call me for this kind of stuff. And the warden didn't tell the warden what he saw, but the warden kind of takes this to mean that the plumber saw something strange happen and was spooked by it also. So the warden's like, well, this seems supernatural, so I'm going to call a reverend. Which is what he does.
I was hoping you were going to say, so I'm going to have to call up the supernatural prison and then reveal to me that there's one of those.
That would be pretty neat. So the reverend, who is also interviewed in Unsolved Mysteries, says the warden was also. So like a lot of these characters in this episode. Yeah. And the episode was, filmed years after the incident. So it stuck with them. And, they are sticking with their story too. So the reverend kind of describes it as, quote, I received a frantic call from a sergeant in the jail, and he said, can you come over? We need you. We need your help. So he brought this very meek and mild-mannered young man into the room, and he was asking for my help. So Don tells the reverend that he can make it rain, and that when crosses are placed on his body, they burn.
And he scares away plumbers.
Hence, plumbers don't want anything to do with him. And the reverend kind of, is also taking this as like a skeptic standpoint.
Yeah,
it's like,
of course.
You need to admit what you're doing here, buddy. Like, fess up.
You're freaking everybody out. You're freaking out the squares.
And all of a sudden, Don's demeanor changed, and that putrid smell came over the room. And Don like raised his hand and rubs his fingers together, like kind of like
the money, like, give me some
money. And all of a sudden, it started to rain.
Oh boy!
And the Reverend opened up the Bible and started reading to him.
And what else can you do?
But the Bible never got wet.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly,
waterproof Bible.
And the Reverend admits, like, I think I was praying more for myself at this point than him, because he was freaked out. And he prayed, and it was really not. It didn't really take very long, but the rain did stop, and it subsided. Don sort of like returns to his normal self, and he explains it as like there was this feeling of peace again that kind of came over, and he says, I have no doubt that Don was possessed. They hug, they kind of get teary-eyed, and Don was like very relieved.
Not too teary-eyed. We don't need any more waterworks.
He was like, there's just no way a human could do that in that room. And so Don said that the bizarre occurrences after that are over. They kind of just never happened since. It was really during that very like heightened period of like emotional.
Yeah, like grandfather who abused him dies, and
no one knew or believed me. And he says that he believes his explanation for what he thinks it is that it was his grandfather's doing, that he abused him in life and then had a chance to abuse him after his death.
Right. So he had like a little waiting,
game.
Little waiting time in purgatory before he went to hell.
Right.
He's like, let me use this to keep tormenting my victim.
Yeah. So the episode of Unsolved Mysteries was filmed, and the production was one of the most difficult ones for them to recreate the rain inside.
Okay.
Like just the practicality and the logistics of people are drenched, and now you have to now do another take and
there's lights,
dry you
cameras,
off, and
they can't get wet.
They had to like squeegee off the floor. And they described it as like they actually had the room kind of like on a slant, so the way that the rain was
water
looking
would drip or whatever.
But on the very last day of filming, the crew was staying at a hotel nearby, and they woke up and there was 2 inches of water in their rooms and in the hallway.
Oh, boy.
And the hotel workers couldn't explain why. But the director, who talks about it later, and other people on the production said, like, maybe Don had something to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's all up to our speculation.
I wonder if that freaks, like the crew of Unsolved Mysteries, are they easily freaked out, or are they like we do so many of these things?
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking they do so many, like they don't believe a lot of stuff, but then something like that happens and probably did freak some of them out a bit.
So there was a video I watched recently. It was like kind of brought back a lot of people who had worked on the original show to just kind of talk about the show. And this episode was one of them, which is how I know about this.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, a lot of the episodes were like, they did a lot of course, not everything they did was paranormal. There were so many things like crimes, and then there were like missing people or long lost loves. And things like
paranormal stuff was like a subsection.
Right. But the consensus from these people was sort of like they say that the people like experienced something. Like they met these people and they could feel and believe that they've experienced something. They're not just, pulling their leg.
Yeah. Not just trying to get some of that sweet Unsolved Mysteries money.
Right. And it sounds like a lot of people would write into the show after they had experiences, like tell them about it, and the show would a lot of times end up producing those stories.
Yeah.
So it was almost like healing to people to be able to participate in the production also, after they've kind of gone through this really like earth shifting, life shifting experience.
When I worked on America's Most Wanted, one of my jobs as an intern was to like answer the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you they never looked at the mail for any like potential cases. I was never instructed like, oh, I think maybe they told me like, look, if you find something like really good and you can like Google it and you find anything like corroborating, sure. But other than that, don't bother us with all the mail that we get from kooks.
So there aren't a whole lot of explanations for what was going on there, except for this one that
says he was just very sweaty.
He was just very sweaty. He spit when he talked. No. There was a medical sociologist and a paranormal researcher from New Zealand who examined the case and said that he thought this rain could be the result of ice damming. And ice damming is when warm air enters an attic and then melts the snow on the roof and kind of, as the temperature drops, ice forms and then that traps the water that can then leak into the house. And it really happens after major snowstorms when the temperatures rise above freezing during the day and then drop at night. And at this in Pennsylvania, in Strasburg at this time, this was February 1983, the daytime highs were in the 40s and 50 degree area and the nighttime lows were about 20s and 30s. So like below freezing. And there was a major snowstorm in the area about 13 days earlier. So possible explanation, but the fact that this could maybe just happen at the house, like how does that explain the restaurant? How does that explain the prison? You don't think that can
explain how he made a ball of water levitate at the prison warden and hit him in the chest? Yeah, and I mean, that also sounds like the kind of thing where if that happens in your house, it doesn't happen just once when, something else they would be like, oh, this house, every time it snows and then gets warm and then cold again, it rains inside.
Right. There's also like the suggestion that stress can be involved. So like, talking about how Don kind of went into this trance, like triggered by being in prison and then losing his grandfather and having to like confront the fact that he was abused and the reaction to that news or lack of a reaction to that news, almost as if like this could be some kind of like a maybe like a mass hysteria kind of thing, like everybody's kind of it's weak. It's a weak argument, but he does question why no one photographed or videotaped anything or like called the local news if this was going on for days and days.
But 1983, people didn't have video cameras yet, most people. Right. And even like a regular, like I remember as a kid, we would have a camera at home, but we didn't always have like film, like at the ready. It was like, you bought film before a birthday party or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Although I would have gone out to the store and got some film if it was raining inside.
Yeah. So, I mean, that the other, people think maybe it was a hoax, but like don't really have a good way to explain it.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty interesting that there are so many witnesses who really are not only like
credible,
saw it and are credible, but also were like comfortable coming forward like many years after the incident.
I also always find stories more credible where it's like an occurrence that kind of had a beginning and end. Where I feel like sometimes you hear about these things and people come forward and they're like, and I still have my gifts, I still have my abilities, and then they can't prove it or whatever.
Right.
Whereas, for some reason I find it more believable that this happened for like a week and somebody had, or, maybe a few weeks or whatever. And it was during this extremely traumatic time that somehow manifested this. But then, a priest came in or a pastor or whatever said a few words and whatever it was doing, it was like, all right, not worth it. I'm moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. Certainly weird.
I'll say.
Yeah. Do you believe it? Do you think it happened?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think what's so interesting about this is like I've never heard anything. I've never heard a story that's similar.
Yeah, I mean, you teased this story to me, and I was like, "What? What do you mean? There's a person who could make it rain inside, and there were multiple witnesses." Yeah, it's that's another thing that like gives me more confidence in it being true. It's just like it's one of those like too weird not to be true,
right?
Type things. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool. I'd like to have the power to make it rain inside if I was upset at somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not that useful, but it'd be fun to pull out at parties.
Just keep people on their toes.
Yeah, or when the police come by.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Want to Hear Something Weird? Listen, we're super excited to hear from our listeners. We're on social media at Wanna Hear Pod. And really, if you have any feedback, comments, suggestions, you want to email, that'd be great. You can email us at
wannahearpod@gmail.com.
And if you want to email us an audio note, we might just play your voice on an upcoming episode. It could be something weird that's happened to you. It could be one of your theories about one of the things we're talking about. It's up
We'd
to
love
you.
to hear.
The sky's the limit. I mean, not the sky's the limit. Don't send like a 3-hour long rant, but, keep it succinct. Want to Hear Something Weird is a Clamor audio production distributed by the Cloud 10 Network, hosted and executive produced by me, Tom Reynolds, and Laura Anderson. Executive produced by Aaron Hilliard, Clamor General Manager, Rich Statter. Associate producer, Ethan Aronson. Post-production supervised by Devin Ruskin. Production assistant, Samara Malik. Special thanks to Sim Sarna and Saiba Krieger at Cloud 10.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device, or play on PC through Facebook Games.